Hello, viewers. I am David Adebanjo Adelegon, and I welcome you to my YouTube channel. It's another wonderful episode on data analysis, and today we'll be discussing multiple regression. But before we continue, I would like to acknowledge the expertise of an erudite scholar in the Department of Science and Technology Education, Faculty of Education, University of Ibadan, Nigeria, in person of Dr. Nathaniel Omilani. He taught me how to use multiple regression, and it's a great delight for me to share this knowledge with you this very moment. Alright, before we proceed, you would need to know one or two things that we will be doing in this particular episode. This lesson has to be well organized. As such, let us consider the objectives. First, the meaning of multiple regression must be known. Second, it's necessary to drive multiple regression according to the assumptions. Third, multiple regression needs to be run step by step. So this lesson is going to cover a step-by-step demonstration of how multiple regression analysis is conducted. We have multiple regression as one of the various prediction tests for analyzing parametric data. Multiple regression happens to be a kind of test or analytical tool that enables the researcher to predict specific value of one variable when the values of other variables are either known or assumed. As a way of modeling the relationship between variables, multiple regression calculates the different weightings of independent variables on a dependent variable. A dependent variable is a variable that acts as the outcome, or can just be described as the outcome of whatever manipulations a researcher actually does on an independent variable. So, it is the result of the prediction, the result of the manipulation or changes that a researcher enacts on certain independent variable of independent variables, while the independent variables themselves are such variables that are not determined by any manipulation in any other variable. Moving on, it's necessary that a researcher analyzes certain data based on the assumptions of whatever statistical tool is to be used. For multiple regression, it's necessary to note that all variables must be on a continuous scale. This is because the variables that are worked on using multiple regression are variables that are not categorical in nature. By this, it's important that by the time the analysis is being run, or when the data sets are being imputed on the particular tool, in which in this case is multiple regression, the measure must be on a continuous scale. Second is that all the independent variables must not be strongly related to one another. This fulfills the assumption that by the time the variables are considered as independent variables, there is no relationship existing, no prior relationship or no relationship pre-existing among them in terms of their connection to one another. However, the third assumption is that each independent variable must be strongly related to the dependent variable. This fulfills the assumption that there has to be a linear relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable. Each independent variable is expected to be related to the dependent variable, but no independent variable must be related to another independent variable. For the purpose of this lesson, it is necessary that certain data sets or data items are made use of for us to run multiple regression. As such, a fictitious topic that has been created for this lesson is this: study hours, previous scores, sleep hours, sample questions studied, and performance index by learners in English grammar. Study hours, previous scores, sleep hours, sample questions studied, and performance index by learners in English grammar. So what is to be considered are the relationship or the contribution of study hours, previous scores, sleep hours, sample questions studied to performance index by learners in English grammar. It suffices to say that this study hours, this previous scores, this sleep hours, and sample questions studied are independent variables, while performance index by learners in English grammar will be the dependent variable. So how do all of this contribute to the performance index by learners in English grammar? Here on, we move to the practical imputation of data for us to have a step-by-step demonstration of our data analysis. To do this, we'll be making use of SPSS package on our system on the personal computer. So on your personal computer, you go to your desktop page where you have your SPSS software. Open up, we cancel this, and then we have a fresh page this way. On this page, it's important to understand there are two views. We have the data view, which we are on presently, and then the variable view, which we have here. The difference is that the variable has a description of name, the type, the width, decimals, label, values, missing items of the data, that's where we put them, then the columns, the alignment, whether one might justify right, left, or center, then the measure, and this is where we indicate the scale and what have you, then the row, then the data view is where we insert the coded data in terms of whatever we have chosen to use as the coding item. So we have an existing data set for this lesson. However, we need to impute a few just to learn how it is done. So the first thing to do is to check our variable view. Here we insert the items, that is the variables. We have each variable, and the first that will be inserted is the performance index, which is our dependent variable. So it goes this way. We do not leave any space because this particular software would not permit that. So performance index. The next is hours of study. So we could just say hours studied. The next is the previous scores. Previous scores. Previous scores. The next is sleep hours. Sleep hours. The next is sample questions studied. Sample questions studied. And here we are. We can set the type. They all are numeric in nature because we're dealing with numbers. The width, about 8 items. The decimals 2. Label, we have nothing here. We have no values to indicate, and this is as a result of the kind of measure we operate. So the measure we should have here should be scale. That's what the assumption says. All should be on continuous scale and not any other. Why? Because our variables are not categorical in nature. And when we mean categorical, it means we're trying to say that they're either ordinal or nominal. That is, the variables have sub-items. They have items under them. They serve as categories. As such, we will choose either ordinal or nominal. Ordinal would imply that the items in the categories are arranged in a particular order where one is superior to the other. But nominal means both or all of the items, all of the members of these categories are on the same level. None is greater than the other. However, since our data, our variables are not categorical, we go with scale. That's why we have scale all through on the measure. It's fulfilling the assumption of multiple regression. And let's see how it looks like on our data view. Here we are. The performance index, the hours studied, the previous score, sleep hours, the sample question studied. Then after this, we can begin to insert our codes. What we mean by codes is whatever representation we have for each of the items, but in this case, we're just dealing with the scores directly and they're all numerical. So, for example, we have 91 here. Then next we have 65. Next we have 45. You must note that 1, 2, 3, all these numbers refer to the number of participants that we are working on. So the performance index of student 1 is 91. The performance index of learner 2 is 65. That of learner 3, 45. Then the hours studied by learner 1 is 7. Learner 1 has spent 7 hours, and learner 2 has spent 4. 7. Here we have 4 hours by learner 2. Learner 3 has spent 8 hours. Now the previous scores, we have 99 here, we have 82 here, we have 51 here. We have to be very careful when inserting the scores not to have missing data, albeit it's very important to observe should there be such cases. Sleep hours, we have 9 hours here, we have 4 hours here, we have 7 hours here. That's the number of sample questions, past questions studied by these learners. We have 1 past question, 2 here, and 2 here. So this is an example of how to impute our data. But the existing one that has a fuller version of complete 20 items or of 20 participants is what we have here now. So this is the full version of what we are trying to do. So just to save time, we move on straight to the step-by-step analysis. So let's not forget, performance index is the dependent variable, while these others are the independent variables. So the first thing to do after we have imputed our data on the data view is to go to analyze. On the taskbar here, hop the page of the SPSS sheet, we have analyze. We click on analyze, then we go through and look for regression. We are working on multiple regression. Multiple regression is one of the tools we have under regression analysis. So we pick regression and we move on to linear. We click on linear. Usually we have this here, so this has been done, but we try to purify this page. So afresh, we have all our variables in this first box. So we move our performance index, which is our dependent variable, to our dependent variable box. Let's repeat that and see how it works. We select the dependent variable, click this arrow to the right, and here it is. If it is to be removed, you click on it to the left. But since this is where it has to be, it's left here. Then the remaining variables, which all are independent, are brought to the independent box. And the next thing is to select OK. Here we are. The result is out. The result is out, and we can see our variables entered. The variables that we have entered: the sample question studied, previous scores, hours studied, and sleep hours. We can have the model summary here too. We have the model summary here. This R stands for regression at 0.996, and here we have the adjusted R square 0.990. We have this table indicating the significance level or the significance level of the joint contribution of the independent variables to the dependent variable. So this is the significance value. The significance value here is it 0.000. So how do we know if the contribution is significant or not significant? The rule is that dealing with humans in the discipline of education warrants that we do not zero into 100% significance level because of the possibility of changes in human behavior. There is a room to give the 0.05 probability index, as it were, as a means of identifying that it is possible for certain changes to occur. That is why we have 0.05 as some sort of significance level determiner. However, once the result indicates that whatever we are working with is below 0.05, whatever we are working with is, once it is below 0.05, then our significance value of 0.05 is said to surpass that result, which means that whatever we have got, which is below 0.05, is significant. So as it is, our regression here is 0.00, and that is below 0.05. So the result is significant. If it was above 0.05, if it surpassed 0.05, then the result would not be significant. So the joint contribution of our independent variables up here all together, the joint contribution is significant since the result states that we have 0.00, whereas the p-value of 0.05 is what is observed. So our regression of 0.00 being lower than 0.05 indicates that the joint contribution is actually significant. However, we may want to seek further to determine the relative contribution of each independent variable to the dependent variable. So we have the significance value of each independent variable, the relative contribution of each independent variable to the performance index, which is our dependent variable. So for R studied, we have 0.00, previous score 0.00, sleep hour 0.016, sample question studied 0.023. This shows that all our independent variables are significant in their relative contribution to the dependent variable. But for the sleep hours and for our sample question studied, we can see a little difference where we have 0.016 and 0.023. This could mean that R studied of 0.00 significance value and previous scores of 0.00 significance value are more significant, or have contributed more significantly, or have more significant relative contribution than sleep hours and sample questions studied to the dependent variable. This kind of interpretation can't be done on this page because this is our output sheet. This is just the result sheet. So where do we carry out the interpretation? We need to create a Word document where we can type out the interpretation we generate from the results. As such, we go back to our desktop page and create a new Microsoft Word. So this is a fresh Microsoft Word document. This is a fresh page of Microsoft Word. So we copy the result from our SPSS result sheet. We can select the table, right click, copy it, then move to our fresh page of Microsoft Word and we paste. Here we are. Then right here we can begin to we can begin to write out our interpretation. We type out our interpretation of whatever we have in our box. So a demonstration of this, an example of this that has been prepared, can be found here. We have an existing one, so multiple regression result sheet, and here we are, the interpretation. So from the table we see that there is significant joint contribution of hours of study, previous course, sleep hours, and sample questions studied to the performance index of learners in English grammar. And this is how we indicate the formula. The F value, taking note of the degree of freedom at 4, and the total of 6120 here is brought down here, equals to the F value itself, 4.450.464 we have here, so 450.5. Then the regression of 0.996 on the table we had seen earlier here on the result sheet over here. So we come back here and we see it. Then R, adjusted R squared as well, 0.990. Then the P value, which is 0.00, lesser than 0.05, which indicates that indeed the joint contribution is significant. Furthermore, the coefficient table tells us the relative contribution of each of hours of study, previous course, sleep hours, and sample questions studied to the performance index of learners in English grammar. While students' sleep hours and sample questions studied have significant contributions, students' hours of study and previous course have more significant relative contribution to the performance index of learners in English grammar. We can see that here. So it's likely that this show the more significance than this, or the higher level of significance than this. Right? So the inference is made that students may be encouraged to spend more time in studying as well as pay more attention to their performance in previous tasks for sustained improvement. For them to do better, it's good that teachers encourage students to spend more time in studying, spend more hours studying, since it shows that both the hours put into studying and the performance in previous tasks seem to contribute to the performance index of students in English grammar. Teachers may need to encourage students to do more in this regard. And that is how multiple regression is run and interpreted. It's a very nice tool for the purpose of identifying the joint contribution of independent variables to the dependent variable, and further can be used to identify the relative contribution of independent variables to the dependent variable. For a recap, we come back here to see that the first thing to do is to open the SPSS package on your personal computer, enter the variables and their measures on the variable view, enter the data appropriately on the data view, go to the taskbar at the top of the page and click on Analyze, select Regression, then Linear. Afterwards, insert the dependent and independent variables in the appropriate boxes, click OK. The results needs to be copied from the output sheets on SPSS for interpretation in an MS Word document. In conclusion, what needs to be known is that multiple regression is used to identify the joint and relative contributions of the values of independent variables to the value of a dependent variable. I hope you have enjoyed this session today. Please do not forget to like this video, do well to comment on it, and certainly share with your friends. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's David Adebanjo Adelego once again, and I say bye bye. Thank you.